This is Snakes and Otters, a pointless discussion of eternal questions. Get ready. We're about to live in your head rent free.
Good morrow, Otterites. This is episode 237. I am Martin.
And I'm Robert.
I'm Francis.
And I'm Andre.
So you notice we're missing the Imperator and Cajun. We've discussed Cajun's absence, and again
In the prior episode, yes.
you know, a little medicine mishap there, a little medication mishap that he encountered. The Imperator has gotten word that the
Empress.
Marco Mani have broken through the frontiers, so he's got to gather some legions and go suppress an invasion of Roman territory. So we're missing him right now.
That and the Empress is going away for a while, so
Yes.
he's got to be with her.
He's got to be with her.
Actually, to be fair,
Yeah,
he
the Augusta.
the Augusta, yes. To be fair, the Imperator and the Augusta are going to spend time with the grandchild. That is far more important at this point in time.
Yes,
given their circumstances. So
I had made up a perfectly good story, and you all had to tell the truth now. Come on.
well, you know,
A substitute
I say that
reality.
just as a reminder that we need to, always be praying for the Imperator and the Augusta at this time, because it's a very
Yes.
sad time
It is.
still, and will be for some time.
Yes, they're going through some difficulties, and
Yes. So, what are we doing today?
at Code of Honor.
Woohoo!
Woo! I, as captain, I have decided to conceal the quote, mostly because I just decided on it as you all were driving here. But welcome to Studio M, as I was telling the fellas.
Yes, we didn't even talk about being in Studio M
Yeah,
in the last episode.
we're here
Yes, you did,
down in Studio M, and I don't have company a ton, small families, and so this is my opportunity to serve. And I like playing bartender for the fellas. So
Here, here.
I've poured everybody a little something, and we're getting good and lubricated to discuss Max Weber. So Weber is kind of the world's first sociologist, so to speak. And what he was especially studying, the sociology of capitalism, the sociology of other structures in life that impacted that. And he takes sort of this opposite to Marx position. So Marx is economics determines everything else. Religion, government, other social structures are a function of economics.
Economics and power. Economics is power.
Yes. That these other structures then support the economic exploitation, essentially. That's what they're all for, is to provide economic exploitation. And Weber flips that to a degree in his thesis, and I want to make sure I get this title right: The Protestant Ethic and the Spirit of Capitalism. He says, no, it's the other way around. Yes, capitalism has existed in some form for millennia, but in its modern, and to him modern, we're talking 1905, 1910, okay? In its modern investment-driven guise, capitalism is an offspring of religion, in particular, the Protestant work ethic. And so this is why this is, I'm sitting here with 3 deacons of the Catholic Church, and this idea that in Lutheranism, in, Northern Europe, and Calvinism, all of those structures of the Catholic Church are now wiped away.
Not in Lutheranism, though. It's still a very liturgical.
Well,
structural.
but the hierarchy, the idea of the bishops and the priests.
There's still some of that in
Yeah.
Lutherans, but you were right. In the
But-
Presbyterian Calvinist, it's
it's
a little more individualist.
One of
yes.
Luther's central propositions is everyone can preach the gospel.
Decentralization. Yeah.
Yes, not just the priest. So now people are, well, okay, but how do I know if I'm saved? What do I know? And that Protestant work ethic emerges as the sign, especially again in the Calvinist predestination notion, that emerges as the sign that you are saved. The classic WASP, keeping your yard mowed and weed free and doing your job and making sure the trash cans are properly sealed.
So, and I've thought this before, but you have codified it in my mind so much that I have to drive this home because it is my job as Robertus
the hammer,
Malus.
yeah.
Yes. What they have done is they have returned to a form of Pharisaism.
Yes.
Yeah.
Ooh.
Yes.
Because
it is.
It is all. Oh, you want me to give that a
Word boner.
Yeah. Because it is very much even though they would deny it, a works-oriented theology in that sense.
Yes.
Even though, and especially Calvinists say, well, it's not works because it's all predestined. God makes you do these things.
Right. It's
which I can't stand that theology because it's so
supposed to be a sign. How do you know? How do you tell?
Right.
So let me give you the quote. So you're definitely, your mind is working in the right direction. So
when is it not? Sorry.
So here's the quote. But at least one thing was unquestionably new: the valuation of the fulfillment of duty in worldly affairs as the highest form which the moral activity of the individual could assume. The only way of living acceptably to God was not to surpass worldly morality in monastic asceticism, but solely through the fulfillment of obligations imposed upon the individual by his position in the world.
Oh my God, that is so Pharisee.
That was his calling.
Was that Joel Osteen?
Well, and again, that is part of where that prosperity gospel is coming from as well.
Because I'm about to tear that to
and
shreds.
That's where you want. That's what you want to.
Now, again, this is not necessarily Weber saying that's right. This is his observation of the state of the world, and taking a contrary position to Marx.
Being 120 years removed from when he said this, it's a little hard for me to argue necessarily with his observations of the time, as far as whether or not he was right or wrong, because that could very well be the religious zeitgeist of that waspish. You want me to get okay?
Word boner.
That's 2 word boners, and we're not even 10 minutes in yet. So perhaps that is true of the time. Now, I would say one thing though. The whole idea. Read the quote again, because that first part I had some serious disagreements with.
At least one thing was unquestionably new. And again, when he's talking about new, he's talking about at the time of the Reformation.
Yeah. Oh, at the Reformation. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
The valuation of the fulfillment of duty in worldly affairs as the highest form which the moral activity of the individual could assume. Okay, so that is, how do we prove we're moral? How do we prove we are saved? Again, this Calvinist idea, you're predestined. You're either saved or damned, nothing you can do about it. How do you know? I'm fulfilling worldly obligations. I'm doing a good job at work. I'm keeping my house clean. I'm keeping the yard mowed. I'm making sure the trash cans are sealed up. All of those little things in our life that became the Protestant work ethic. Again, the Protestant ethic, the Protestant work ethic we're all familiar with. That became the outward sign of God's favor.
So
interesting. He uses the term outward sign. That's
Yeah.
from the catechism.
So,
outward sign.
well, I've got a couple of things, and then I will turn this over because I don't want to dominate this whole thing. But I mean, this kind of discussion is right into my wheelhouse.
Bring it on, baby.
Hence why I
It
jumped
shows- yeah.
at the last moment what I was going to do to get this.
So I mean, first of all, this whole idea that this outward sign, this what you do is new, is total BS. Gospel, or the book of the letter of James says faith without works is dead. So from the very beginning, we have looked at your works as a potential sign of whether or not you are in God's grace. Not an absolute sign, because we have never, ever used it as an absolute sign that you're in God's grace. But this whole idea that it is new is either and 400 years post-Reformation, this is very possible. They have lost the historical sense of Christianity because the Protestant work ethic, the culture that grows out of, has lost all sense of historicity.
Right, but
by that
again,
point.
he's analyzing
He
the
is. I get
point
that.
of the Reformation, and when you think
I'm just-
about, this is a holy cats. What do we freaking do?
Right, but I'm saying that whole idea that that's an outward sign is not new at all. They have lost that idea because they've lost the historical roots. But also, this is a function of Protestantism that this is even a question. For Catholics, this would never even come up as a question.
Agreed.
Yep.
Because, as St. Paul says, we work out our salvation in fear and trembling.
Yeah.
And again, being the Catholic, using these biblical references to refute the Protestant idea is quite satisfactory, let me tell you.
Ironic, but satisfactory.
We can't
yes.
tell you where in the Bible all those quotes are, but we know they're in there.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I'm not saying that he's wrong in his observation of the religious and social zeitgeist. Definitely not. But I'm just pointing out that zeitgeist is terribly flawed.
Yes. Okay. So your contention is, he's observing it, but where the Protestants went with it is incorrect.
Right. Well,
Theologically incorrect.
Well, theologically, and I think even if, and granted, 100 years ago it would have been very difficult to have an honest discussion and examination of the totality of Christian history. Because again, if he's pointing at the Reformation as the starting point, which most do, there's about 1,200 years, anywhere between 12 and 1,400 years that most Protestants at that time totally ignore.
Right, because here, again, the situation is, and especially when you talk about Northern Europe in their
Yes.
Reformation, is the average person isn't that far removed from pagan theology, so they're Catholic and they're coming through. And again, where Weber comes into my consciousness is I'm currently reading Arthur Herman's The Viking Heart, and I love Arthur Herman. He's the author of How the Scots Invented the Modern World. We discuss an Arthur Herman book in the very first episode of Snakes and Otters. The To Rule the Waves, how the British Navy came about, and he's discussing Scandinavia, and the Catholic roots were wide but not deep in Scandinavia. And so
That's probably, but and to be fair, at the time of the Reformation,
yes,
most people's religious roots were probably framed and even after the Reformation,
yes,
in the pray, pay, and obey.
exactly.
The authoritarian
Exactly.
model, yes.
Yes, because even after the Reformation, especially when you have a Calvinist theology, it's pray, pay, and obey because that's God's will, and you have to do that.
Right. I mean, they are taking, a spiritual authority. That's what Luther is rebelling against, is this limited spiritual authority of priests and bishops, and you do what the hell they tell you, and you don't know any different.
But he replaces it with just local.
Right.
Folks, yeah, I
Right.
mean,
it
it's-
becomes, on one hand, it's awesome. It's, well, everyone can know the gospel.
Yeah.
Everyone can
Yeah, we're all called
explore the gospel and preach it. But you have to understand now, a lot of these decisions about changing the religion of a country aren't up to the people.
Well, they have never been.
Right. So it's the king is deciding, hey, this whole idea of kicking the Catholics out means I can
Raid the
seize,
monasteries.
I can seize all their shit.
Yep.
I can seize all their shit
Thank
and
you.
give it away to my buddies and buy loyalty.
But where is that
Thank
going to
you,
get you in
Henry
the
VIII.
long run?
Well, but when you're trying to shore up an unsure throne, it certainly seems like a great idea. And so, now but the regular people are struggling to figure out, well, where do I go from here? And that's what this became. That's what Weber's commenting on is people had to figure out what this meant for them.
Is
And they this idea of, well, I can show God's favor by being a hard worker,
right,
fulfilling my
and
duty.
certainly
Okay,
that is a
stop.
German idea.
Yes,
The-
yes.
If you mark God's favor by your lawn being cut, your trash cans being in the proper place, then I would say you're true. However, the God that you are speaking of is a small G, in my opinion, and not a big G.
Yeah,
Very,
that,
very,
that's
very
the,
astute.
and again, that's the criticism. Then when the friction between the Protestant and especially the Calvinist ideal, and the true Catholic faith.
Thank you.
Am I phrasing that correctly?
Yes.
It works. Yes.
The one true church. Yes. The one true faith. Yes.
And you said you went on to say that the Protestants were vehement that all people were to proclaim the gospel. The Catholics have always said that in your baptism you are called. All Catholics are called to be a priest, prophet, and king, and spread the gospel.
To be fair, I have not looked at the baptismal rites that were used at the time of the Reformation. And it's questionable whether or not I even have to see. Did they do it in the vernacular? Because certainly the mass wasn't in the vernacular.
No, none of that would have been. It
would have
was
been
all
all Latin.
Well, but in a rite like baptism,
And-
it could have been. But the point is, though,
but most
even
were
though-
illiterate and wouldn't have known it even in the vernacular anyway.
well,
When you're talking about pre-printed materials and
there were printed
you
materials at
had-
the time of the
yeah, I
Reformation,
mean,
but
you
yeah, and that's
had-
kind of where I'm going, though.
yeah, you had to take the priest's word for everything.
As well, not exactly. Yes and no. So as Brother Andre alluded to, we may not be able to give you chapter and verse because that's not what's important to us. Unlike many, especially fundamentalist groups,
Right.
where they absolutely have to memorize chapter and verse for things. And that's actually part of some of their traditions. Traditions. I just like to get a zinger in there every once in a while. We know the stories, and partially that's because we do know the stories because through the great art, the stained glass, we know the stories because they have been presented to us for centuries. Now, I say that coming from a Baptist background,
Yeah.
So
John
being
3:16.
yeah, so Catholicism is my adopted home, so to speak. But still, we do know it. But I think when you are living at a subsistence level,
Yes. Again.
proclaiming the gospel in a evangelical, let's go on missionary work kind of way is a non-starter because you're busy.
You
trying to
can't leave the harvest. Yeah.
Right, you can't leave the heart. You're busy feeding your family.
There's some lovely fields down here, Dennis.
Exactly.
Preach the gospel always. Use words when necessary.
Yeah, which St. Francis apparently never said, which is really a shame.
I don't know. I'm going to give him credit
Um,
for it.
But still, though, the point is that in many ways, and so maybe this makes some of his criticism about capitalism valid and linking religion, because that missionary work is something that only the rich can do.
Right. And again, part of Weber, what he's observing about capitalism at this moment is again investment capitalism.
Right.
What are Protestants doing with all that hard-earned money?
Showing God's favor, buying bigger houses and castles, and
And investing in
Well, they're investing in U.S.
Stocks.
Steel, Standard Oil.
the emergence of this style of capitalism where you're taking, well, I'm working really hard and I'm actually making money. What do I do with it? Well, I'm going to
I'm going to lose it all in the crash of 1929.
buying extravagances would have been, we can't do that. That's ugh. Can't.
ooh,
that's-
brother, what's that?
I guess maybe, and Francis, you're being awfully silent over
I'm
here.
gonna address that in just a moment.
Maybe he has a valid criticism, but I don't think it's as directly linked as the quote implies. Only because it sounds as if the quote is saying that there is a direct, oh, well, we've made all this money and
God must love us.
Well, yes, I mean that's partially going to be part of it, but I mean that God is directing us to go do these things, and I don't know that that's necessarily the case. It may be a
Right.
logical
It's
result.
it's a flawed assumption, but it directed their behavior.
Yeah, but
It
I don't.
drove their behavior.
It's not. I don't think it's a conscious thing from a
a,
religious perspective.
a flawed assumption drove their later behavior.
Well, yes,
Again,
there's
as a
that.
sociologist, that's what he's going to be concerned with is human behavior. What drives the human behavior of
I think it's correlative, not causative.
okay,
Causative.
good,
Because
good.
again, the faith, their faith, even though I would call it a flawed faith. Sorry.
What's our clock saying?
We are at 20 minutes.
We're trying to clock this episode.
So yeah, I would say it's correlative instead of causative because their faith isn't saying let's create this investment economy. Their faith is saying let's do all this work, and then as a result, okay, well maybe we are affluent. We got to figure out something to do with it. And you're right. Some of these are not going to be into a whole lot of extravagant luxury, so they got to figure out what to do with the money. But I think there's still a lot of that luxury stuff going to be going on.
Yeah.
But I don't necessarily think it's the faith that drives. Okay, let's create the investment. It's maybe a side effect.
It's a side effect of the faith that
Well,
drives the Protestant work ethic.
It's a side effect of the result of the faith in action, is the way I would put it.
All right. So, Brother Andre, go ahead, and then I'm going to put Francis on the spot.
Because he's been very
Oh
silent.
God, I am doing my very best not to interrupt because I have a tendency to do that.
Well, I'm
okay.
going to just let you run off with it.
Oh
Here
no,
in a
don't do
second.
that. Robert would
Go
have.
ahead.
I want to.
No. You go ahead. Sorry.
I want to rewind back to the base premise that this argument is there's a direct correlation between faith and money. And I think that might be a flawed assumption in Weber's assessment because faith and money don't necessarily they are not related.
Well, hold on. Again, I don't think it's Weber's assumption. Again, he's a sociologist.
Right. He's not asserting that's.
He's saying that's what is the result
That's
of
what
the
he's
Protestant work ethic.
Yeah, he's
That they
observing that because they are now afloat without the guidance of the church hierarchy, they had to figure out something else. And that became what we know as the classic Protestant work ethic, the WASP, ideal in America. You work hard, you drink hard, you keep your yard mowed.
This is a
And
lot like Catholics.
Protestants don't drink though.
Yes, they do. It's
Well,
mainly
yes.
the Baptist and
Baptist,
similar
but
that
Kind of tweak,
Lutherans and Methodists will drink like a mofo.
they'll drink with us Catholics.
I'm kind of
Yes.
tweaking the Calvinist Baptist type. Thou shalt not drink, nor it might lead to dancing. You never know.
It might lead to dancing.
Yeah, that's why they don't have sex standing up because it might lead.
I did hear that the Baptists are going to allow dancing
That's
now,
one of the reasons I brought it up. Yes,
Yes, but
that's
it has to
as
be the
long
Trump
as it's the
dance.
Trump happy dance.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
well then and we've circled back around to the politics.
You got a golf swing at the end.
Yes.
All right. So,
But again, it goes back to real quick. Just to sum up his point. It goes back to the Jewish idea that God's favor rested on you if you had if you were blessed with great harvest.
oh yeah,
and all
yeah.
of that.
And Weber does do that. He does tie that all the way back to Judaism.
Yes, it is very
Yeah,
much.
was
That's
using
why I
that
said
as-
it's a very Pharisaic philosophy.
Yes.
Yeah, and the gospel itself preaches literally against that at almost every point, particularly when during Jesus's ministry period. There's tons and tons and tons of examples about how dare you suggest that the blind man's family or himself sinned in order to make
Yes.
him blind. I mean, that's kind of the same
What
thing.
sin did this man commit or his parents?
That's
None.
right, and that's John's gospel. But it is essentially what we're talking about here is how is it without a tethering of, and I'm not necessarily saying good or bad, but it's without a tethering of a theological interpretation of prosperity, because prosperity is a given by this time. By the time Weber's writing this, you're in a time where now, not again, there's still great poverty.
Yeah. I mean, again, 1905 was the Edwardian era. It's the
It-
era of technological progress,
It's also the era of
Industrial progress.
industrial
big
progress.
capitalism, huge industrial capitalism, and
Yes,
ultimately
trusts
it's the
and-
trusts, you know,
yes,
and
in America,
in
yes.
America, and that's and a lot of where this goes is what do you? And I think Robert's exactly right. Now, what do? You've got all this obscene wealth, and I'm speaking of the J.P. Morgans, etc., about this time.
Yes.
But I don't know that I don't know, and I'm gonna look to you, Martin, to decide if he's speaking about that in particular, or is it broader than that?
Well, I think he's just trying to explain in a sociological
Yes,
manner
yes.
how we got there without a value judgment as to any of it. It's like
Right.
Well, he's suggesting
right,
then
because
that
when you think about the robber barons, what we call robber barons in the U.S., that he would be familiar with from Carnegie and on, well, none of them dudes is Catholic.
that's right, that's correct.
You know, they're Protestants.
So he's making a connection then between that, and I'll go ahead and say it, that obscene levels of wealth and the Protestant
The-
work ethic.
The
Is that what did that?
the investor economy is
Thank
tied
you. There's the
to
word.
the Protestant work ethic, which is then
Sooner or
tied
later
to
you-
this idea of the Reformation cut the average person loose from their moorings.
I think he's going. You go ahead. I have a comment on that.
Yeah,
You go ahead,
I'm
'cause I think you're-
thinking that the investor economy is exactly what we're talking about here, because that's unheard of in medieval
Right,
society and things
right.
like that. That's what we're talking about here, and he's suggesting that because capitalism has been so successful, ironically for a particular smaller group than the norm, but essentially there's some of that.
But it's raised more people out of muck than anything else.
There's some of that. That's correct. But ultimately, at the point he's
I mean,
speaking of it here,
Yeah, no other system ever lifted people out of. There's some lovely filth down here, Dennis.
that's right.
than capitalism.
That's correct. But by the time he's speaking on this, it has reached the point where capital has become so enormous in the hands of a few, mind you, because he's speaking anti-communism here. It's a response to that. Communism is speaking about that.
Anti-Marxism.
Marxism
he's,
is-
he's
yeah,
a
close
little
enough.
before Bolshevism and
Yeah,
everything
all right,
else.
yeah, fair enough. But the Marxism he's talking about here, that he's speaking capitalism is what we got, and because because it has been so materially successful, the investor economy has begun.
And
it
he's
was
trying
in-
to explain
and it was-
where that comes from.
and it was in his mind inevitable.
Well, I'm not familiar enough with his thought to say that.
Fair enough, but that's what I'm hearing.
This is
that-
again. This is research from 10 o'clock last night to this morning.
Yeah. From what I'm hearing is, but it does.
Minutes and minutes of research.
It is very logical here that once you because the Protestantism does not value creature comforts beyond a certain level.
Well,
There was, yeah. I mean, there is a Puritan style idea.
It does not tend towards
Protestantism.
hedonism.
Yeah.
well,
where ostentation
At
is
the time
out.
he's speaking.
but again though, because there are so many, even at the time, it's far worse today because anybody can open up a church and
Oh yeah,
they are their
yes,
own
yes,
denomination of one.
Yes, the splintering. Yes,
Yes.
that's a good
Splitters.
point. Yeah.
And so, there is a strain of
I thought we were- I
fundamentalism
thought we
in
were
this
the
country.
People's Front.
Yeah, that's right.
Oh, it's a popular front.
That's the,
No, he's over there. Splitter. Oh, sorry.
But there's far fewer splinter groups at this time than we would consider
Yeah.
even a minimal amount, and so a lot of the mainline Protestantism is still going to be relatively hierarchical. Even Calvinist groups have a hierarchy. It's just there's no
It's more local.
pope over all of it. There's what we would call national conferences.
Yeah.
Right.
Or there's a local synod. And even some of that is after splits. So, there is a progression down to a more local governance. But you still have the Episcopalians and the Anglicans and the Methodists and the Lutherans are probably, they're the four largest of the
High church.
high church Protestant groups. And in this country, that's probably the majority of them.
Yeah.
The non-liturgical high church groups are going to be in the South,
Yes.
and they're going to be of a Baptist Calvinist bent. Not necessarily all of them, but that is the
It's a huge
prevalent.
number. Yeah.
And so, and again, that's also a reaction against the papist tendencies of those high churches because they have the trappings.
Yeah.
Mackerel snappers.
Yeah, mackerel snappers. Yes.
That is a reference I don't know, and
Oh, mackerel snapper.
I'm going to ask you about that after
Okay. So, but mackerel snapper.
word boner.
That. But all I want to say before we go to the break, because I think that's what you were pointing
Yes,
at me for,
yes.
is that I think his observation and the meaning he's drawing out of it is a projection. He is projecting backwards in time.
Ooh.
I think he
Yes,
he is working
he's
problem the opposite direction. I don't think there is a direct linear path from the Reformation to capitalist investor economy, so much as it is the capitalist investors of the time looking for a way to get over their Protestant guilt, because Protestant guilt is a big thing.
To give themselves a
Is that a thing?
foundation, a spiritual foundation
Yes,
to
say
what they've created.
right, because honestly, I don't know that you would say that the Carnegies, the Mellons, the
Morgan, JP Morgan.
J.P. Morgan, any of these large families are necessarily super religious. Now, some of them are very super philanthropic, and that's again, maybe that's where some of that that WASP guilt comes into play. But I think the analysis and the reasoning, the justification, to use a really, really charged term in all this, is working its way backwards to the Reformation, not the Reformation principles working its way forward.
Very intriguing.
Intriguing. All right, so give it to us, Robert.
Bourbon break.
All right, so Francis, let's have you go first. I poured you some Eagle Rare, which we've had on the show before.
Oh, Eagle Rare.
Oh yeah,
so
90
good.
proof, which I didn't remember that it was that low of a proof here. You have set me up very effectively here with the like spherical.
It's 90 proof, but it is 10 years in the
10-year.
barrel.
I went
Oh.
all 10-year plus with our pours today.
It has a very, very smooth sting.
I mean,
A smooth sting. That's an oxymoron.
That's exactly
Eagle,
what that was.
Eagle
what I chose to
Rare. I mean, if you are ready to jump from entry level bourbons,
Yeah.
Eagle Rare should be your next step.
do. I would give that.
the problem is
agreement.
finding it, though.
It is tougher to find.
It
That's
is
right.
tougher to
It's-
find.
it's
And
gonna-
affording it.
It's coming out. It'll start
And
to improve its availability. But go to
We'll see.
the distillery.
And which distillery?
Well, Buffalo Trace.
It's a Buffalo Trace
It's
product.
Buffalo Trace. So of course, if you go to the gift shop at Buffalo Trace, it's well known that they're putting something out.
Right.
One of their 3 or 4 of their brands will be out in the gift shop at any given day. You just don't know which one.
Yeah.
So you don't know if it's going to be Blanton's, if it's going to be Eagle Rare, if it's going to be whatever. But if you can score Eagle Rare, that's your next step.
Yeah, it's well worth it at $80.
Oh no,
No. It's a
Re-
$50 retail.
Retail would be about 45 or 50.
Yeah.
When Mrs. Robert got me that bottle the last time we were over at my place, she paid $50 for it at Liquor Barn.
Yeah.
Now I had paid
Yeah.
$70 for my
Yes.
first
I
bottle
think that's about what I paid.
at a local
70
place. Yeah, we got it at the
Same
place
place.
over my house.
That's
Right.
Yeah,
This is my second bottle bought at the distillery for retail. But yes, secondary market you're gonna be at 70 or 80.
Yeah, that's where
Uh,
because it's not always available.
Yeah,
but,
the first bottle I
but
bought.
damn, it
down
is
the street
good. I
is
mean,
eight-
I remember
is 80.
and Cajun, if he were here, he'd tell the story again that our first bottle that first bourbon we ever tried at the age of 12 was Eagle Rare.
That
And
must have been a really, given the stories you've told about the bourbon consumption in your family,
Yeah.
that must have been a very special occasion because that would
it
have
was
been.
my sister's first communion.
Yeah.
My
I mean,
dad-
it wouldn't have been.
Yeah, certainly it wasn't. Where it is now. That
All-
would have
all-
been a whole different.
it came in.
All of those Protestants that listen to us, first communion, bourbon at a first communion.
Yeah, it was the
Who
celebration.
doesn't?
Celebration
Right.
afterward, and it came in a wooden box with a little slide up front. Now you have to understand,
Like a Booker's, yes.
Yeah, and it was. You have to understand it was made at the time by Seagram's. That's who my father worked for. So he's going to buy the higher end of their thing to offer
Yeah.
for this event. And God save me, at 12 we didn't know any better, so we had bourbon and Coke, which I mean you have
But when
to,
you're 12, that's
you're
almost
12, that's right.
yeah.
But it was
I mean, we all started that way
we had
because
to,
we
and it
didn't know any better,
didn't
but
understand
also it helps you acclimate.
When I
That's
was
right,
a
and-
child, I thought as a child.
thank you, St. Paul.
Oh,
You're exactly
thank you.
right.
Very
You're
good. Look,
uh,
look at us Catholics
look-
going
look-
scriptural.
Look at this bullshit.
Yeah. But no, the 10-year it sticks around in the mouth. It goes a little up the nose, but it's not much of a hug at all. But damn, it is smooth. It's got a bite. It's got a smooth bite.
and flavorful.
It's a
and
rich bourbon.
10
that's
years
probably the best
old,
one.
and
That's
yeah,
probably the best
just
one.
so I mean, if you can get a hold of at retail Eagle Rare, do it.
Well, even the $70, I think it's
yeah.
worth it.
If you have to go 70 or 80 for secondary market Eagle
Yeah, you'll be
Rare,
fine.
Well,
do it.
You'll pay that. You'll pay the secondary market price in a lot of stores.
that's
yeah.
right. Yeah,
Because I mean, that's what I paid at one of the smaller liquor stores. They tend to go a little higher, partially because they can't give the discounts that liquor barns and Kroger's do.
Well, they get away with blowing the price up.
Right,
well, that's
unlike a chain or grocery store.
right.
You know.
Well, they're owned by smaller proprietors, not corporate owned. So
yeah, they're trying to make a margin, and they'll take because they know if they can get it, if they don't have that many. Eagle Rare is one of those things people seek out.
right.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, that's one of the things. If you find it, yeah, you can get that out.
It is a phenomenal bird. You did a great choice on great job on all the choices, in my opinion.
All right. Speaking of which, what's
Well, let me go to Robert because
Yeah.
we'll do Robert next here. I
So-
poured Robert some Henry McKenna 10-year-old bottled in bond.
Right. I think we had that the last time.
We've
did.
had this
Yeah.
before, yes.
And straight off, obviously the ice was already in, but I like to take that first sip to get a baseline to see how it is. And it's got a bit of a bite at first. What little rye, I don't know how much rye is in there, but the rye that is in there comes through primarily when it is neat. Now, after it is bloomed, and I will take a sip here. So after it is bloomed, the that little bit of peppery taste hits in the back of the
Yep,
mouth and the tonsils,
Mhm.
a little bit in the upper palate, and kind of like you guys were talking about with the Jeffrey Creed Weeded on the last show.
Yeah.
The sweetness comes in very subtly at the end, in the back of the mouth on the tongue, and it's a great combination of flavors. It's one of those bourbons that it's not a one note. It's not a one trick pony, something that's 10 years at 100 proof ought to have a lot of flavors and richness to it.
Yep.
And this certainly does. It is a very good bourbon. It's one of those ones. It's a good sipping bourbon. You shouldn't mix. I wouldn't put this in a cocktail because I think.
Oh no.
Yeah.
Well, I mean,
Same
some
as
bourbons.
I mean, it would elevate a cocktail.
it would, but there's no
huge.
point.
There's no point.
Yeah, you don't need to make a cocktail out of this to make it palatable. Whereas some bourbons are better for cocktails, because again, some bourbons by themselves are just not as good as others, and so mixing with other flavors helps elevate them.
Yeah.
Whereas this doesn't need elevation; it does the elevating.
Yeah.
Eagle
So,
Rare is the same way.
so as a bottled in bond, it's 100 proof.
100 proof.
So
and
not super high, but in that
that's
nice
my
middle
starting point. That's my
sweet spot.
yeah.
And if you find it, listeners,
About
it's
60, 65, something like that.
60. Yeah, right in there. 61 right now at Kroger.
That's a good price. Yeah.
So yeah, it's a good price. 61. If you go to the Mount Washington Kroger, there's a few bottles on the shelf for about 61 or 62 maybe. 61.90 or something.
Yeah.
And it's it will be marked as to when it was barreled, the whole bit, so you get that
A true age statement.
you know it when it went in the barrel and how old it is. So pretty awesome stuff.
Love it.
So actually, even though this is bottom bond, since you have that, this is also a single barrel because of that.
Yes.
So-
yes, you will have that on the tag as well.
Yeah, because if you know the exact barrel this came out of, then that automatically tells you it's a single barrel as well. I mean, it's really kind of unique in that sense because you don't usually get all of these things coming together in a single bottle that you know the exact age, that it's a single barrel, that it's a bottled and bond, and 10 years. Bottled and
Yeah.
bond is usually 4 to 6 is what you see on those. I
Yeah.
mean, it's 4 years minimum, but most bourbon you see on the shelf all the time rarely go beyond 6.
Yeah. So I bought that bottle at a small liquor store out in Brother Andre's neck of the woods. So I paid a little more than
That one you will.
yeah,
you
that
paid
place.
the East End tax.
Yeah, I paid East End prices at $80. But that was before it was a little bit more available. So if I ever buy another bottle, it will be at Kroger prices, more like 61. So um, Brother Andre's taking it a little bit easy these days. He's fresh off a stomach surgery. So I didn't pour him a ton, but he said, "Pour me what you poured for yourself." So I poured my
Oh.
top level 15-year-old IW Harper. I bought this bottle last February. It appeared on the shelf at my Kroger. Um, it runs 90
It
plus.
was last February?
Last February.
So was that was after we had been to the Sherwood for the final time, right?
Yes.
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 Okay.
Yes. So I had a glass of it there. Loved it.
Yes, it was a phenomenal. You gave us all a sip. It
Yeah,
was great.
it appeared on the shelf. I grabbed it for $96. Woo, doggies.
That for you? You spent $96 for a bottle of bourbon,
Yeah, so I was not popular with
Robert.
Mrs.
I think
Martin
we've
for a little while.
finally reached our apex. We finally got him to spend some money on some bourbon.
He had spent money on bourbon.
He has, but not
Yes.
that much at one time. We finally.
Well, the $80 on the Henry McKenna. I mean, yes, that is.
Yeah.
Well, you have bottle of Booker, so you spent
90
95 bucks. Yeah.
$93.
I know. I'm so proud. I mean, we've
So,
birthed a little bourbon as aficionado
Yeah.
here.
So this was bought with the idea of sharing it the next time Bjorn was back from Japan, which I did do. I didn't open it until July when he was in town, but
How did Bjorn like it?
you know,
He's younger, so
yeah, you know, he likes potent stuff. He
Well-
likes high proof stuff.
Okay.
but he likes it for the burn and the effect as
Yeah.
opposed
Well,
to the flavor. Yeah.
That was one comment I was going to make when I tasted it blind, not knowing what I had. I thought I was drinking a higher proof bourbon because it has a bite to it, and a very
got some
complex
power,
flavor.
but it's only 86 proof, I think it is. But aged 15 years, some nice smoothness.
It's
Again,
a rich, dark color, which you'd
it's-
expect for
yeah.
15 years.
It's super hard to find, of course. Like I said, they had like one case.
Yeah, I mean, you're
And
very lucky.
I've never seen
February.
it at the stores.
Yeah, and that it was gone within 2 weeks. But I love it. I just love it.
It is very good. Yes.
super complex flavor.
What is that flavor? Because it has several notes when it hits the tongue the first
It's got a
time.
little bit of tiny bit of licorice flavor to it, I think.
Okay.
The way it hits me, which I know isn't necessarily Cajun doesn't like licorice flavor,
No, I don't either.
but and then all
Not
of a
black
sudden,
licorice, yeah.
it's all of a sudden kind of vanilla cream, sort of again that a touch of sweetness hits you at the second part, the second flavor in.
The the last flavor that I get after sipping it, let it settle on the tongue, is cinnamon, and a warming
Yep.
cinnamon.
Yep. A little baking spice, cinnamon type stuff. Similar to what you noticed in your last one, that sort of baking spice flavor to it.
That's I mentioned in our secure chat, and this is something that I really want to do. It's a little pricey, but I want to put together the money to get one of these Knows Your Bourbon kits.
Yeah.
The guy has put together 18 of the most common items that tasting notes or nose notes,
Right.
that you get, and it also comes up with the tasting notes as well, and just little bottles of stuff that will give you a good smell. And his recommendation is you smell it, you drink, and you smell it again, you drink, and when you do that the second drink, you are able to more fully pull out those flavors. Because
the nose is an imprecise science, and I think there's a lot of
it is
talent.
partially because it's what we associate with the smells,
That's right, and it's
and it colors our our memories.
I wish my smell and my tastes were more developed. I mean, I bow to you guys that seem to get that much easier than I do.
After Cajun, Martin does, I think,
Yeah,
the
absolutely.
best
The
job.
two of them got the.
My man,
Although
Brother Andre
you're really,
is
you
catching
are
this.
really,
I really,
yeah.
really appreciated his insights. And
Yeah, because I want the kid, because I want to help develop my nose for these things, because I couldn't tell you what allspice smells and tastes
Yeah,
like.
yeah.
I mean,
Go
yeah.
to Kroger, get a baking tin, and put it on your tongue. You'll never forget it.
Well, that's the other thing.
and-
That's
and
right.
then you'll
I
get
mean,
kicked out of Kroger,
that is
too.
something we've discussed in the past. There are spices, and then there are these other kinds of spices.
Yeah, and that's the thing.
I mean,
could
we're
put
not talking
together-
about jalapeno and adobo chilies and
right.
shit like that.
It's just burns. Yeah, I mean,
We're talking about baking spices. We're talking about
Right.
allspice and cardamom and
And to be fair, I
stuff
could
like
probably
that.
time. and
find a
many
good
others.
number of these myself. But by the time I bought the little jars, put everything in, and did all of that work, I probably could have just gone ahead and ordered the kit.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and
but that's
some of that stuff is probably in your cupboard
Yeah.
already.
Yeah, probably. Yeah.
it depends. You don't eat a lot of baked goods anymore either.
No, I don't.
So it depends on your how many scones and muffins and things like that
Well,
that
there's
that you're into.
I've done
that
some
you
stuff
get.
with
Yeah.
some of these different recipes where you soups and things like that.
Yes.
You're adding that stuff to it. I had no idea, but it really does make a difference.
They're-
Thyme in particular is an enormous powerful spice that I didn't realize made things so good.
Yeah.
So,
And it's very much the earthy flavors. That again, you're getting it from the grains that are in there.
Yes.
That's where that comes from.
And that's the thing, I
And
think a
you're-
lot of the flavors that I have pulled out, I give the closest approximation to the taste and the smell that I get out of it, only because I don't have a good enough reference to give you. Oh well, it's actually it
Right.
tastes and smells a little maybe oaky or the char is coming through, but really maybe it's something else.
Right, and again, when we say baking spice, you're generalizing all of those things.
well,
Yes.
You're generalizing vanilla and allspice and nutmeg and all.
Right,
that
and when you get the citrus tastes and smells
stuff.
like,
yeah,
what's the one that had the pear?
wild turkey.
Wild
Wild
turkey.
turkey is pear and vanilla.
And
Yeah.
now that one you absolutely
You absolutely taste that. Yeah.
yes.
Right,
Once you
absolutely.
realize, once you say pear, it's like, oh yes, pear. That is absolutely.
Well, that's one of
pear.
the reasons it's my
Yeah,
favorite because
so-
that's easily identifiable.
Strong recommendations all the way around. Eagle Rare, Henry McKenna 10-year-old bottled and bond, green bottle, and if
IW
you see it, IW Harper 15-year-old. I so love it. Maybe it'll be back on the shelf in February. I'm almost through this bottle.
I can see that. Yeah,
Incredible, incredible, and it's a gorgeous bottle. And I might set it aside for
Oh, you should.
a decoration or an infinity bottle or something.
Yes,
Yeah.
that's exactly what I was going to say. That would make a great infinity
Yeah,
bottle.
it is a square bottle, and it's a little squat. It's a little. It's
The facets, the
Yeah, the little
crystal facet,
diamond
this-
shaped
Relations,
facets.
that's
Yeah,
right, yeah.
So it maybe I'll fill it with sand and make it a bookmark.
oh, absolutely. Yeah,
yeah,
bookend or something.
A husband of one of my wife's coworkers makes lamps and other pieces out of
Oh yeah,
out of bottles.
yeah. All right, onwards and upwards.
Return us back.
So I want to wrap this up in about an hour or so. So
We got about
we're-
15 minutes or so.
Yeah, so I want to go back to Francis as senior deacon of the group,
Well, I
and
suppose,
someone
yeah.
who has the archbishop's ear.
Oh Lord.
And
Yes.
well, you talked about the imperator while we were eating breakfast kind of made a little jab about driving the archbishop around.
I have
yeah.
done that. Yes.
Yes, the archbishop is new to the area.
3 years in, 3.5 years in.
Yeah,
Yes, that's right.
and for a while had to cover not just the enormous
yeah. 24
Louisville
24 counties. Yeah.
Yeah, he was also covering Knoxville.
Yeah. Which is
because-
half of Tennessee. Yeah.
So
a third of
because
it.
the archbishop in Knoxville was a jackass,
Pretty much.
Well put. I did meet him once. I didn't have a bad experience, but I have spoken with many.
Well,
that did.
when there is a priest rebellion
That's right.
against the archbishop,
Well, you
shit is going off the rails.
you
because
nailed it.
priests don't do that.
That's right. You nailed it very, very well. And yeah, he was removed, and he's been since replaced. And apparently, the new guy's doing fine.
But Archbishop Fobb had to kind of cover that
he did as the
diocese for a period until
he's the metropolitan, and that means he's the archbishop. He's responsible as metropolitan for when this kind of shit goes down, and for all Kentucky and Tennessee.
yeah.
And so he's the titular guy that they're going to make sure to. Okay, somebody's got to run this at least in name. And I, as a diocesan employee, I got the opportunity.
Not deacon, but he actually heads one of the.
I had one of the agencies
one
for
of the
him,
agencies, yes.
and I got.
We don't get paid as deacons.
No, but
No.
I got the opportunity. We rotated to drive him down. He got just a little work done on the way because it's very stressful, as you know.
Oh, it's a huge job.
It really
Huge
did.
job.
And
Yeah, I mean, he had to do this right
But,
after he took
we
over
were kind
here.
of kidding as, this sort of driving Miss Daisy idea,
well, to be honest, it was a joy. It really was
Yeah.
a joy.
But you
I did it
got
twice.
to work with him,
Well, I
and
mean,
drive him
as
and-
one of
and
his
discuss with him.
directors. We had the opportunity to spend, but I also got to see him as person. We had dinner
Yes.
together at a really nice restaurant there. There in not far from the Chancery there in Knoxville, and we just got to spend some personal time together, and it was it was really great. Well, the first time I went down, he was meeting the deacons of Knoxville for the first time at a large event. Well, having a deacon go take him down there was a great idea because
Yes.
when we went in, nobody would sit with him. And I was able to go around and talk with him because it's just like, okay, come on, let's. And by the end of the night, it was really just an amazing event because anybody that meets Archbishop Fobb, you fall in love with him very quickly.
He's a
Tell
very
ya-
much more down to earth
He's very down
Yes.
to earth.
person.
He's a
than
shy guy.
Previous,
He's a great, but he's a
administrations or-
great leader. He's a great
is.
leader. He's very decisive. He doesn't mess around.
The thing
Uh,
that makes him great, in my opinion, is similar to what people used to say about Kurtz.
His predecessor.
Yeah, Kurtz is one of those guys that he's a, and this is not necessarily a bad thing, but for the most part, I think it ended up being this way. He's a great politician
Oh yeah.
in the sense that he's really great at the
Gift of gab.
small talk interpersonal interaction. Now he's also very good at names.
That's a gift he had. Yes, that's true.
And that's one of the things that initially I think endeared him to a lot of people.
Yeah, because he remembered your name.
Because you remembered your
Meeting
name and
one
your
time.
situation,
Yeah.
yes. But he was never a personable on a one-to-one level kind
He
of
was
guy.
not exceptionally warm and fuzzy. Not that that's a
No.
requirement,
No, it's not.
but
But
Archbishop
it's a
Fobb
stark-
is.
But
Yeah,
it's a stark contrast.
it is. Yeah, it's
I
just,
never
it's
came
changed.
away from an experience with Kurtz where I felt like I needed to be a better deacon. Fobb always makes me feel like I need to live up to him,
Yeah, he's.
not in a bad way.
Yeah, he is.
He pushes you
it's-
to be better.
It's an inspirational I need to live up to him, not a guilty I need to live up to.
Right, and he's such a guy that he's willing to open up along the way. I mean, he talked to me about things, and I can't share them, but about you're really talking to me, little old me, deacon guy, about this big time stuff here. I mean, he was very forthcoming about all sorts of things. I'm thinking, wow, thank you for being.
In some
frank with me.
ways, he reminds me of how Cardinal Dolan interacts with Father. Oh shoot, the guy that does Busted Halo, Father Dave Dwyer,
But yeah,
in New York, and he's a Paulist father.
yeah.
And they are on Sirius Radio on the Catholic channel together on
Mhm.
quite often. And Dolan has a similar
Yeah.
personable style. Now,
It-
Dolan is far more outgoing than Fobb is, so that
yeah,
makes a
Fobb is
difference.
extremely introverted. He'll tell you that many times.
But once you can get in, like in a one-on-one, he becomes much more able to open up. Still not, like us this,
No,
but,
I'll tell you this much here. He's a giggler.
I can see that.
Archbishop Fobb is a
I
giggler.
can
Quiet. I would imagine a quiet
A
giggler.
quiet giggler, but when it's one-on-one, I was in the car with him for 8 hours twice, for one way and for one way back twice. And we would talk about his family and his life, and he would speak about his father, and he'd imitate his father, and he would just giggle. And I'm thinking, thank you for that. That is I know
That is a gift.
it is I mean, it's just you're
A
being
gift to you. I mean,
it is. It's you're being really nice to do that, and I thank you.
well, it's a testament to you as well that he felt comfortable enough to. Because with an introvert, you have to be comfortable with somebody to be able to do that.
Right, and he's very different from Dolan. I mean, I've had the opportunity of meeting Dolan. My wife and I. She still talks about the event, and he's like Teddy Roosevelt. When you leave, you have to wring the personality out of your clothes. That's what how Roosevelt was described, and Dolan is the same way. He's got that moment of it's just. I mean, he is the big dog daddy, and but
Yes.
he also
But
makes.
he's great. I mean, I would love to spend
Yeah,
time in a conversation.
I had about 5 minutes with him. My wife and I did. She still talks about it, and he made us feel like he'd known us forever. We were his best friends, and we were the only people that he talked to at that moment.
Yes.
And this was in the receiving line, and you know that was the deal, the way it went. But it was fantastic. But Martin, you had a reason for bringing this up. We've gone down a
Well,
rabbit
just
hole again.
I'm posting you as the authority here.
All right, okay.
And I just to finish the rabbit hole. Well, geez, I guess I would love to meet Archbishop Fobb sometime.
Could
so
be arranged.
if he's not averse to meeting a heathen.
Well, I mean,
He
getting
would look at it as an opportunity for evangelization.
getting him.
You know, there's a great
one-on-one
time that we
meeting-
can have him meet you, and that's at the Easter Vigil.
That's right.
Well, I might be busy.
Oh,
Well,
the right
no.
of election.
Well,
Yeah, right,
seriously
right.
though, I mean,
But I mean, listeners, these guys have threatened to
drag you over the Tiber.
they've threatened to bless the ice cubes and then throw some melted water on me.
Well,
Uh,
I can tell you this: a good opportunity, and we'll do it in the spring. He comes to St. Gabriel, my parish, for a confirmation. Just attend. I'll introduce you. You get a couple of minutes with him. At least you can say, "I've shook his hand. I've said it. You know, I'm not even Catholic."
Well,
yeah, I
Martin,
mean, the
you may want to
reason
do it this way. You may want to find out. If we ever have another if we have have another confirmation at one of my parishes, they're much smaller. It'd be a much shorter mass. You may want to wait and do one of those rather than the, multi-hour affair it's going
Well,
to be at Gabriel.
I like to think
Gabriel.
we do it very efficiently.
We only
Doesn't matter. It's
confirmed,
still well over
95
an hour.
Oh, it is. Yeah.
Yeah.
We confirm 95 at a time.
Oh, shut up.
Yeah, ours is about 80. Yeah, 80, 85.
well,
something like that.
it's just the again as an outsider, as someone observing, I'm so happy the archdiocese has brought in someone who they can feel this close to.
I'll tell you what.
it is.
Someone who has this again, not to knock Archbishop Kurtz, but again, he was more of this sort of authority figure.
He was. Yeah.
Where
Well, and he
Fobb
also never
is,
thought he would be here as long as he did.
and Fobb is more of this. He really views himself as a pastor.
Yes,
Ding, ding, ding. That's
absolutely.
exactly that. And I'm telling you, he's really, really very good at that. He is for the people, very much so. He wants
Yeah.
for the salvation of souls, and we're so grateful to have him. Also, one of the reasons he was sent here, and this to me confirms my faith in the hierarchy. I know that our Protestant brothers and sisters go, "What are you talking about?" But one of the reasons Archbishop Fobb was sent here, and it was very clear at the time, is because he is African American. He's from Houma Thibodeau, originally from New Orleans, but the Vatican, Pope Francis, recognized the racial problems we in this Louisville community have were acute and intense.
And not that they were necessarily Catholic problems.
Not at all. No, not at all.
But he
But
saw this as an opportunity.
As a,
yes.
opportunity.
as a community, because the Archbishop of Louisville, as in any archbishop in a metropolitan area, has enormous influence, and he wanted to bring someone who could bring people together on the racial issues, because Archbishop Fobb himself wrote the USCCB document, Open Wide Your Hearts, on racism.
And
That
he
is-
heads up the committee at the
at the USCCB as well.
USCCB. Thank you.
That's right.
So
And
it's-
speaking of
United States Conference of Catholic Bishops. I'll just,
Yeah.
I mean, we throw out these
Yeah.
acronyms.
well,
hate
again, he's from a very very small parish in Louisiana.
that.
So
Well, I
this
mean,
was
well,
this
he-
was
he
it was
was-
good for him to bloom into a much larger urban parish, and it was good for us.
yeah, it was
to bring him
our
in.
diocese, which is a mid-sized diocese, mind you, is 10 times the size of where he was at Houma Thibodeau. Now, he's from New Orleans. His original assignment as an associate, as auxiliary bishop, was New Orleans. That's pretty big time. That's
Yeah,
pretty
but
strong.
it's, I mean,
It's not the same.
It's not as like coming up here.
And if
Yeah.
if
Well,
rumor is to
I
be
mean,
believed, if you want to meet him, you better make it sooner rather than later because he's probably not going to be here long.
Well, we said that about Kurtz too.
Yeah, but the Pillar wrote a very in-depth, as usual, article about this just a few weeks ago, because he's been again named to that committee that you talked about,
Well, I tell you what, if
which he doesn't like. I can tell you that. That's just more work for him on the national level. He wants
Right.
to be here, to be
which
running
is his
that-
pastor's heart.
That's his pastor's
Yeah.
heart. That's right.
If the Vatican really wants to make a statement with him and how important this issue is,
Yeah.
I don't expect them to do this. They would give him the red hat and leave him here.
Oh, I don't. Oh,
A cardinal in Louisville,
Hey, we are the oldest diocese west of the Alleghenies.
a cardinal in Louisville.
Well, who they would have said the same thing about a cardinal in Indianapolis, but that happened for a brief time.
well,
I'm not saying it would become an historic cardinal
yeah,
like Chicago, Philadelphia, New York, Baltimore, etc.
well, he's been
But-
talked about as when Cardinal Gregory, who is himself African American, in Washington D.C. retires, which is I mean, he's actually over age now. There's talk about Fobb being his replacement, and which does carry eventually a cardinal's hat.
Yes, it does.
That's what the Pillar article. You can look that up, folks. It talks about that,
well, and again,
and they say it's very soon.
the guy that they
hope
named
not.
cardinal in Indianapolis, he left, and they did not. That is not a cardinalate see.
Yeah.
like the others are.
But
You
that's
could do the
because
same thing.
He was earmarked for a cardinal seat
In Newark,
in Newark.
Right.
He's
Again, that's my point, though. It's a twofer. If you really want to bring attention to those particular issues, you do it while he's here. Now,
Oh.
you also have to do some planning to help bring that kind of attention.
Fobb would be just.
He
beside
probably would
himself.
hate it.
He would hate it. He'd be beside himself.
And honestly, he would
which is
probably.
why you would do it, because he would hate it.
That's
you
exactly
want
right.
your leaders to be reluctant leaders.
And he is.
Yes.
I cannot speak enough good about the man. I work with
Okay.
him. I can email him. I can text
Well,
him.
and again, to
And it's a great-
circle us back before we finish up, we need to finish up soon because we've got lunch waiting. But that's, I wanted to give Francis a little authority
Yeah.
on this topic. But
Yeah.
let me give you the Weber quote one more time.
Right.
But at least one thing was unquestionably new: the valuation of the fulfillment of duty in worldly affairs as the highest form which the moral activity of the individual could assume. The only way of living acceptably to God was not to surpass worldly morality in monastic asceticism, but solely through the fulfillment of obligations imposed upon the individual by his position in the world. That was his calling.
Right. That is that. In there, the church itself at this point in time has come around to that, recognizing, and this goes back to, we should be in the world but not of the world. What Weber is suggesting here is there's no dichotomy between those
That
two.
you should be of the world.
You
that
should
being
be of
the
the
world.
It's
is
not a
half.
it's not a bad thing.
Right.
In fact, that is a duty, to use his word.
Right. And again, Protestantism largely is rejecting the idea of, I'm going to give up all my worldly things, go into a monastery, wear a hair shirt, and dig in the earth, and then that makes me godly and spiritual.
That's right. And then
And see, I think that is a misunderstanding of the Catholic mindset.
yeah, I think
I won't argue with you,
Yes.
but again, that is the Protestant impression.
Yeah,
Right.
and it is.
Right.
And Protestantism is attempting to reject that, but it in the
They're
traditional
rejecting
Catholic,
something that is not.
they're rejecting something that's not it's irrelevant.
Now, to be fair, because I will give that idea this, in the sense that they did get right. Up until Vatican II, there was a hierarchy of thought as to what your station in life was.
Yes.
So if
Yes.
you, because every young man that could, whose family could afford to send them off to seminaries did, but they sent them to high schools were minor seminaries. So a DeSales 100 years ago, or even 60 or 70 years ago, would have been a minor seminary.
Yeah, there's a presumption that every young man that goes to a boys' Catholic high school
Will consider the
will
priesthood.
consider the priesthood.
If you could not become a priest, join an, or like, and especially, like join a religious order, become
Yeah.
a Franciscan, then you would become a diocesan. And if you could not become a diocesan priest, then maybe you'd look at being a brother.
Yeah.
And if you could not become a brother,
you might get married. Yeah, that's
yes,
right.
then you would consider getting.
And
So
there was a long time of that. Yeah.
Yes, so there was to a certain degree. However,
Never official, but it was cultural,
Right.
sociological.
And
but
I'm glad. I'm going to say I'm glad I'm Catholic because every word of that statement is wrong.
Right, as we
Well, no,
understand it
it's not-
today.
It's an
it's not-
observation.
It's not wrong in the sense that historically that's what was thought. It is wrong in the sense that is
Vatican
not
II
what you should think.
Vatican II fixed that
Yeah.
essentially, and they
Yeah,
recognized.
yeah,
No, wait
right,
a minute.
right. Again-
Marriage is actually a higher calling. They don't.
Yes.
They don't put these
Right.
things in adversarial.
Weber is a sociologist. He's not necessarily making a value judgment
Right. And
of the Protestant thought. He's talking about Protestant thought then leads to this eventuality.
In 1905, which I think
Yeah,
is very
and
critical.
again, he's debunking Marxism to a degree.
sure.
Which
And-
I'm all for.
Yeah.
Yes.
yeah. Well,
And so to that degree, there is some truth in the sense that, especially 100 years ago, when he would have been writing this 120 years ago, there, on the Catholic side, there was a lot of thinking that went that way, but it was not an either or. The church still expected everyone to live a good and holy life.
that is correct.
Right.
And that
again,
meant-
it's a misunderstanding
It's
of,
a misunderstanding.
of grace alone.
But I think it's a misunderstanding on both sides. Because again, I go back to what I said right at the break. I think it is trying to project something back in time to justify what you're doing.
right.
maybe not
then-
consciously.
and again, Weber's commenting on that.
Yeah.
On that notion of, well, where did this investment economy come from? Well, it came from this. What do we
Well-
do with this money? We're working so hard. We're making money.
But again, I think
what do
even
we
his-
do with it?
I think even his observation, though, that's my point,
Yeah.
Build
is
bigger
working
barns.
in the wrong
Oh,
direction.
thank you for that. Yes, that's
What was
exactly
that?
right.
What
Build
was it?
bigger barns.
Build bigger barns, which
Um,
I think that would be Christ's admonition on
Right.
this issue here, whereas because Weber's suggesting here that exactly that since we've got all this money, now what do we do with it? So we
Well,
come up
again-
with the investment economy.
Yeah,
it's this
plowed
observation
it
of
back
what.
into, and to a Protestant that is building a bigger barn. I'm building a bigger company by investing in the railroads or whatever.
Right,
I'm
and-
allowing them to then get bigger and serve us.
And then tonight, your life will be called for.
Yeah,
And
that
to a
that
certain
would be
degree-
Christ's
Yeah.
admonition is
To a certain
you
degree.
might miss the point.
It is possible. I'm not saying it always happens. It is possible to go about your business in that investment economy like that, with the intention of spreading prosperity to those who otherwise would struggle as dirt farmers.
yeah,
Now, granted, they move to the city, and then they just struggle as, for lack of a better term, a grease monkey. Not necessarily just as a fixing cars,
right.
but working in factories. All you've done is change the location of the struggle, and you make money off of it. So again, I think it's kind of assuaging their own guilt more than anything else, and trying to justify. I think it's not a natural progression. I think it's a what's the word?
This almost never happens,
Artificially
folks.
generated regression as opposed to a natural progression.
I mean, thinking you're exactly right. I think that, and of course, this is recognizing our own biases. You've got three deacons
Yes.
that are arguing against this, which is exactly where Martin wanted us to go. That's exactly what it is. We wanted us to tear this down and recognize the fact that I think this is a false statement. Because and I go back to especially to Brother Andre's brilliant quotation of scripture here. Now, we live in a post-Vatican II society.
Right. And again,
we get
Weber
this.
did not.
Weber did not.
Weber did
We
not.
get this. That, wait a minute, folks, the gospel of prosperity, which is essentially the modern iteration of
Yeah,
what
the
you're
Joel
talking about here.
Osteen, yeah.
Joel Osteen, and I love his hair, but that's about it.
Yeah.
I wish I had it, but that's all.
Well, okay.
Okay.
See, I was gonna say I don't even love his hair, but then I can get away with that.
I
That's
would
right,
rather
but-
be bald.
Well, very good. I'm working towards that.
Well, then to be Joel Osteen, yes, but
Well-
he does have good hair. I will give him.
Yeah,
that.
and a Colgate smile. I've preached that several times, because this entire
Colgate smile. I love that.
yeah,
Francis.
that's
Love
a
that.
Francisism. You
I
can
love
take that.
that.
That's me.
I
I
love
made that
that.
up. But it really does explain the fact that this is bloody well self-justification
Oh, yeah,
on the
yeah.
on the front end saying, "My gosh, we got this money. Well, we're just going to do this with it. We're going to invest it. We're going to do all this sort of stuff like." And the capitalists in the room all have their orgasm of saying, "Well, of course you do that. That's all you do." But, and here's the irony: the Christians in the room, which are supposedly the capitalists as well, would say, "Your life, you fool, your life might be demanded of you this night. What will then happen to all your wealth?" And that, to me, I think is where at least I end up landing, thinking that, yes, I'm delighted that we have such prosperity. I'm delighted we have the ability to have disposable income, investment income. I recognize that that makes a better society for all of us. I do not disparage that. But in the end, we must all remember to do that both justly, fairly, and honestly, and never on the backs of the poor, the needy, and the others that made potentially
Yeah.
where we're at, so we can.
Raise them up rather than
That's
exploit
correct.
them.
We have the duty, and this is, of course, where Weber's not is trying to push against. We do have a duty to our neighbor. We do. What have you done? Your brother's blood cries out to me from the ground. That's God in Genesis to Cain versus Abel. We do our brother's keeper.
Yes. It's a very
Certain level.
no. Let him go because he
I'm
was
going
far
to
more.
shut Robert down, and I'm going to go to Andre.
Yeah.
Andre, please. Yes.
Yes, you had something.
You had
You were doing this.
I was raising my hand because you
In agreement, I think. Yeah.
Excellent.
Okay.
All right. Well, in
So,
that case,
Then
let's give Robert one last thing, and then I'm shutting all
Right,
of
'cause
this
Sounds
down.
good.
let me take my jab as the hammer as I used to do on these. Dare I say it? I shall. This
Say it, brother.
Protestant
Say it, brother.
this Protestant work ethic idea that he is saying drives investment capitalism. In many ways, the more I think about this, he may be right in certain ways. I don't think he's totally right because again, I think he's that.
Yeah, it's an observation.
Yes, it's an
Yeah,
observation,
From that perspective,
but I think he's drawing the
is-
wrong conclusion with his observation.
Correct. The
And
observation is not wrong.
Yeah, I think if he were truly observing with an honest mind, maybe he would say, "Well, they may be saying that, but I think, the roots are different." Because again, I think it's a projection back, not a pulling forward. However,
Justification. To use your word.
yes, both that prosperity gospel, that Protestant work, because it is so inwardly focused on
Ooh,
the
yeah.
self
Yes. Thank you.
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
your personal individual standing with God. It is almost by definition, as you pointed out, Brother Andre, concerned with a little g God, not a big G God, because you are looking for, taking your lifestyle and trying to make it fit into, or make God fit into it to approve of it.
You are.
Yeah.
Therefore,
Preach it, brother. Preach it.
just like the Industrial Revolution, at its inherent core, at its base, is a violation of the respect for the inherent
It
dignity
is
of the human person.
Word
Exploitive.
boner.
It is exploitive completely.
I had to do that because I know Martin loves it when I bring that in.
Yeah.
So I am so thrilled with this episode. It was exactly what I was hoping for. And again, I picked this quote out this morning before the guys got here, like 7:45 this morning. So I'm thrilled with it where
I
this
love it.
episode went. I feel like I held my own on the Protestant end against the three church authorities here, but
But you lost. So- I'm sorry. You can't. The three deacons. You can't beat us. You can't argue. You can't
Well,
argue
but
with.
But I don't think
again,
you would necessarily disagree with what
yeah,
we
I mean,
said.
as a value judgment, I'm not saying it's right, but I'm
Right.
saying it
the
exists.
observation
idea-
is exactly. You're spot
Yeah,
on. You're
yeah,
exactly right.
it-
Yes.
the American WASP mentality of I can't let my yard go. I can't let there be a dandelion. I can't, let a stray cat into the trash cans.
Get off my lawn.
That's real.
It
Right.
is.
It
And
is-
this is where it comes from.
Right. All that is your identity is wrapped up in that
You're right.
waspish.
Right.
It is wrapped up in that because let's face it, societal pressure looks down upon you if you let your lawn go.
My identity's wrapped up in Christ Jesus.
Well,
A lot
you're just
Right,
some papist,
right, right.
Mackerel
But
snapper.
again,
mackerel snapper.
when they are cut loose from that foundation, they had to find something else.
Right, and as I said,
and then they had to then latch onto this idea of, I know my identity in Christ then is in my works, my fulfillment of duty. Remember that phrase in Weber's quote,
right,
fulfillment of duty.
Yeah, I think that's the money shot.
I'm,
That's the
I'm
one.
self-imposing all of these duties onto myself, and I have to fulfill them in the world.
but they're individual
And that's
duties.
yeah, and that's
And-
my
and not to say that-
that's my identity in Christ is
Right.
then.
And it's
making
not
sure
to
all of
say
these
that
things are done.
those Protestants, especially those who accumulated great wealth, weren't also doing good works for the masses as opposed to individual good works like
Right.
taking care of my own business. 'Cause
Right,
that's-
and again, I'll guys, me, I will argue that starting a business that employs people is better than just giving your money away.
Yes, but
So-
it's not related to your salvation.
Right.
Right.
Well, it also depends. If you've got 100 people who are literally on the brink of starving to death or needing to buy medicine that would help or help, you can
Right.
make the argument either way. But in
Right.
general, yes.
Well, Victor Hugo was very good with Les Miserables in that very subject. He spent a long time with that, so very much so. So,
Yes.
but we're finishing here.
Yes. I want to wrap up.
That was fantastic.
So, listeners, study Weber. That is now a homework assignment for me as well. Again, because my study of Weber dates from 10 o'clock last night.
But you found a good one. I'll
You
I'll
did.
Oh, this was so much fun.
Yeah.
This harkens back to some of our best
I
code
think
of
our,
honors.
our best episodes are when Francis and I argue. And
It's
I
true.
love,
Okay.
love that. So, Francis, what is next, buddy?
Well, we've been doing a lot on great.
My hero,
great-
my
Thank
gifted.
you.
ride.
Yeah. It's getting deep in here. We have done a lot of work on great directors lately, and we've still got many more to go. And this next episode here, we're going to do one of your guys.
Yes.
We're going to do Michael Mann,
Yes.
who is a great director. I mean, you loved him in particular in Heat. He's a later director compared to, we did John Ford last time,
Yeah.
which is early. Michael Mann is much, much later. And he's one of my favorite directors because of Last of the Mohicans, but you love him for Heat and so many other things. He's a visionary visualist in
Yes.
many ways. So we're going to talk about that art and that craft, which we always love. And we're going to go deep with that next episode. So be here, folks.
We hope you enjoyed another pointless discussion of eternal questions. Remember, new episodes drop every second and fourth Friday at 6 a.m. Eastern, just in time for your morning commute. And every fifth Friday, we drop a special Hoopajube episode. Spread the word we are on all the major platforms, and leave us a review. That helps others find us. We're also on Instagram, Twitter, and YouTube, as well as our website, snakesandotters.com. Join us next time. Same snake time, same otter channel.